How's it going, my friend? It's Danny here from projectmanaverse.com, real technical project management for beginners. So today I'm going to talk about how to be or behave with your project team. I'll talk about what I mean by how to be and behave. I'll tell you why it's important as a project manager to really get this nailed down, and also I'll give you some interesting tips on how to go about it and some general rules about it. So first of all, what do I mean by how to be and behave with your project team? Well, that's quite a wide-ranging subject. So I'm really going to focus today on more of the soft side of things. So how to talk to them, how to act around them, and what kind of relationship and understanding to create with your team. This is really important for you as a project manager because you can't deliver your project by yourself. You can't really deliver any of the project. You are reliant as a project manager on your team members to do all the delivery of the project. You need your engineers to build stuff. You need your testers to test it. You need BAs to do the documentation. You don't really do a lot in terms of delivery. You're just coordinating everything. So if you don't get your relationship with your team right and they don't respect you and they don't want to work for you, then it's going to be very hard to have a successful delivery. It makes such a huge difference. And I think this is one of the separators between a good project manager and a great project manager. If you've got a track record of delivery, always delivering on time to budget, it's usually that project manager has something of an X factor, and that can come down to having that great relationship with your team where you can create a great team spirit. They want to work for you. You've got a good relationship with them. You're all on the same page, great communication, all that stuff. So it's really important that you get this right so you can try and create that team spirit. So you need to know how to behave with them. And this gets easier with experience. It especially gets easier if you start to work with people in the business and you work with them again and again on different projects. That doesn't always happen. It depends what industry you're in, whether you're contracting or whatnot. But it gets easier in general with experience. And the more experience you have as a project manager, the more naturally you start to act with confidence, and people can quickly tell, your team members can quickly get a sense of this person knows what they're talking about. They're a good project manager. I'm going to listen to them and I'm going to respect them. I'm going to respect them. The respect is a key important thing to be able to get this right and really get the best out of your team. So I've talked about what I mean by how to be and behave with your team. I've talked about why it's important. So let's now go on to some of the tips and how you should actually be with your project team. So I've got quite a few things to cover here, but the first thing is to listen to your team and act on their requests. It's important if they ask you something and they need help with something that you act on it. You don't just ignore them or say you're going to do it and then not do anything, which is even worse, which happens quite a lot. And it can be quite innocent. Sometimes you can just forget because you're so busy as a project manager sometimes, and the requests that they make may not seem very important, but it is important to them. Put yourself in their shoes. If they don't usually request that much of you, but the one time they do ask for something, you don't do it, you're going to lose that trust with them, is what I'm trying to say. So listen out. If they ask for something, for example, could be what I get quite a lot on with my team is if they're not getting a response out of someone from the business, or they need something for someone. It could be a senior leader, it could be a product owner, it could be another project manager, and they're not getting a response and they need that person to respond to them. They'll ask me to sort that out, and that's something quite easy you can do as a project manager. You can chase that person down, or if they don't respond to you, you can escalate. So make sure you listen to what people are asking you in your team and act on their requests. Don't ignore them. Okay, that's really important. Number one. Number two is, actually I'm not going to number them because I won't forget the order, but I'll just say the next one is actually pay attention and just pay attention to what's happening in your team and try and gauge if people need help, because not everyone will ask for help. And it might not just be help about, I need to get hold of this person or I need this document. It might be they're struggling, or they're feeling overwhelmed, or they're feeling a lot of pressure and they're just not confident enough to raise that. So try and pay attention, check in with people, have one-to-ones occasionally, or just ask them on your daily stand-up. Make sure you're proactively asking them if they're okay. You don't have to go crazy with it, but just try and pay attention. If someone's unusually quiet or they've been quiet for a while, just make sure you follow up with that person. But just pay attention. You don't have to go crazy with this. You don't have to check with everyone every 2 minutes, but make sure every now and then you're checking in with people to make sure they're okay, because you don't want someone to suffer. You don't want someone to have a breakdown and feel overwhelmed and it all goes wrong and you've lost that person from the team for a few weeks because they signed off, or they move on to another part of the business or leave the team because they weren't happy. So make sure you are not just relying on your team to tell you if something is wrong. Make sure you're paying attention and you're checking in with them from time to time to ask them. So that's my second point. I'm just going to quickly check my little list here because I wrote down quite a few things to go over. So the next one is making sure you're being direct with your team. I say be direct. I mean, don't tiptoe around things. If you want something, just ask for it. Be direct with them, but don't be rude. There's that balance. You don't want to be rude with people, but you do want to show authority and show that you are the project manager, and be direct where you have to be. So don't be too soft. Don't say, oh, would you mind? Just ask them directly, and you can do it in a polite way as well, but make sure you are being assertive and showing authority when you ask people to do things, or what your expectations are, or if you're disappointed that something hasn't been done. Because number one, they will respect you for it, and you'll find that people actually do want to be led. It's your job as a project manager to be that person that assigns the actions and is the one to speak up and say the things that people don't want to say. It's your job to do that, and you often find that people want to be given direction. They don't actually want to have to decide what to do themselves. They want to be told what to do so they can go away and do it, and that is your job. So don't feel reluctant or shy to do that. Make sure you're being direct with people, but don't be rude. There's a fine line there. But actually, it's not even a fine line. It's not a fine line at all, but there is a line between being rude and being direct. So make sure you're direct and assertive and all that good stuff. Okay, next thing is don't put up with nonsense or slackers with your team. If you have team members that are slacking or they're being a bit slippery with actions, don't put up with that. Don't charge in and say, what the hell are you doing, and all this kind of stuff. But when I say don't put up with that, I mean don't tolerate it without taking action. And there's various ways you can follow up and what that action actually is. And I'll probably do another video on it. But the first best way to approach it, and the first thing to do, is to speak to them in private, one-to-one. If this is an ongoing behavior, not just a one-off thing, and just ask them straight out, is something wrong? Because I've noticed you're not being as on it as you usually are. You're not getting your actions done, whatever the actual issue is. And there may be a genuinely good reason for it, and you can get to the bottom of it quite quickly. But it doesn't always go that way, and it isn't always that simple. And sometimes people are just not very, they're let's say dishonest or slippery, so you have to approach it a different way, and I'll talk about that in another video. But as I say, if someone is not pulling their weight in the team, or they're not behaving right, just don't tolerate that. Take action, whatever that action is going to be, but don't just put up with it. Okay, next on the list is, don't be too nice with your team. Don't be too buddy with your team. Even if you get on really well, if you start to be, this is like almost like a general management principle, but don't be too much of a friend with your team. Even though you're not their direct line manager, you're their task manager as a project management. Sometimes you have to keep that line, because when it comes to being a bit firm with them or being a bit more direct than you have to be because your team's under pressure and you have things to deliver, you don't want to be in that position where you can't say that, because it's just doesn't feel natural, because you've become friends with them, you've become too buddy with them. So again, you've got to keep that line. You can have a laugh with people, have a joke now and then, but don't be too buddy with them. This especially applies if you're using third parties, because I've been in a situation where I've been using a third party to build an application for me. And at the start of the project, it's all about gathering requirements and design and all that. And you start to form a relationship with them, that's natural. But you don't want to get too close with those guys, third parties, because when it comes to the crunch and they built the thing for you, if that's what you're using them for, and you start to get defects, you can get into situations where you argue about whether something is a defect or whether you just didn't give the right requirements, and they're saying it's a change request, which is going to cost you money to change at this point. And you're saying, no, you just haven't built our requirements correctly. This is not working right. You have to change it, and this should not be a cost to us. In those situations, You don't want to have got into a position where you're friends with them or you're too buddy, because it makes those conversations very hard and it can sour the relationship. But if you set the expectations and you set the tone of the relationship at the start by not getting too friendly with them, that will help you down the line. So that was my next point. Next on the list is, I mentioned this earlier, but you can have a bit of a laugh with your team, especially if you have a daily stand-up or a weekly meeting. Take a minute at the start just to have a bit of a kind of general banter and chat. I call it campfire chat. Sometimes these big projects and programs can feel so crazy and aggressive. It's almost like going to war every day. But even when people went to war, they still had time to, at the end of the day, to gather around the campfire and have a laugh. You have to have a laugh and to keep your sanity. Everything just seems so urgent and everyone's under pressure and feeling the strain. It always happens with these kind of projects when they're high paced and high profile, let's say, especially the bigger they are and the more money involved, the more people's, I suppose, jobs are on the line, especially up the management ladder when you've got very high profile execs or senior sponsors sponsoring the project and they want to get it delivered. They bring that pressure down all the way down throughout the project. So yeah, so it can be very high pressured and people can get stressed. So make sure you take some time to have a laugh with your team. Again, I don't mean just be silly and don't concentrate on the work, but just take some time to have some campfire talk. Okay, next is, don't expect your team to be working crazy hours and putting in lots of time if you're not going to do it yourself. So you don't want to be in a position where you're asking people to work late or go the extra mile when you're seen to be logging off at 5 p.m. every day because they think, well, this is not fair. I'm killing myself. Why is the project manager not doing it? And how can they have the cheek to ask me to work late when they're not? So when it comes to things like, working on the weekends, even if you can't contribute, which you often can't, if it's just getting some coding done on the weekend, you can't log on and code, obviously, but you can log on and just be there with your team and kind of share the pain with them by doing other stuff. There's plenty of things you can be getting on with yourself. So just, if they're working late, you work late as well. Just kind of show that the pain is being spread and don't expect it all of your team. I'm not saying every single time someone in your team works late, you have to work late as well. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, don't be seen to always just working your set hours and that's the end of it, but your team is going the extra mile. You've got to show that you're doing that sometimes as well. Okay, my last tip is particularly for technical project management, which is what this channel is all about. But as a technical project manager, you may not be that technical. Like, I am not myself that technical. I don't know a great amount of detail about IT and software, but I know the high level stuff. And if that's the case with you, it's fine. You can still manage technical projects from more of a business hat, which is what I do. But you can certainly manage IT projects. You just have to know how to manage things correctly and communicate, and not only communicate with your team, but get your team to communicate with you in a way that you understand. So if you're not technical, be honest with your team and say that. Don't sit on a technical call and pretend that you've understood everything, because that makes it very hard to capture minutes and capture actions and follow things up if you didn't really understand what was said. So make sure you're honest with your team and get them at the end of the call just to give you the layman summary of what was said and the key points. You don't need to know all the technical details behind it. You just need to know what are the actions, A, B, C, and D. Tell me the summary of the actions so I can write them down and just explain it so I can understand it. And if your team with practice can do this, it will make your life so much better. And they should be able to, and you should be able to understand and get a sense of the summary of the technical details, understanding of why they're important and what they actually mean, without having to have the knowledge of the low level detail. So if you're honest with your team, they get to know that and they get to know how you are, and they'll naturally just start to explain things to you in a way that you will understand them. So that's an important point. Well, I've gone way over time there, guys, so I'm not going to do a summary today. I'm going to wrap up the video, and until the next time, please take care.